Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody to this panel, Cultural Resistance and Boycott, Why Art Matters in the Struggle for Palestine. In a moment of ongoing genocide in Palestine, culture is never neutral. Art and cultural institutions are often used to normalize oppression and present an image of business as usual. This strategy is called cultural washing. It functions as a form of whitewashing, obscuring realities on the ground while granting legitimacy to oppressive systems. At the same time, art has always been a vital tool for resistance. Storytelling, music, theater, and film enable communities to affirm their identity, resist erasure, and envision liberation. The cultural boycott, as part of the broader BDS movement, is a direct response to attempts to use culture as a cover for injustice. It calls on artists and cultural workers to withdraw complicity and instead align their work with justice and solidarity. The panel will explore why the cultural boycott is urgently needed at this moment, how cultural whitewashing functions as whitewashing in the context of Palestine, the role of artists and cultural workers in resisting complicity, and how art can help sustain global solidarity and contribute to political change. With that, I'll introduce me and Melissa and the other two people that were supposed to be on the panel today and are not able to join us. Melissa will share some comments from Amin and Gamal. Amin Gamal, they is an actor and organizer. As an actor, he's best known for playing Cyclops in the Prison Break revival, which made him the first openly queer Muslim to play a leading role on television. Most recently, he appeared in the indie film Ride or Die, which premiered at this year's Tribeca Film Festival. As an organizer, he is a founding member of Entertainment Labor for Palestine, a member of Film Workers for Palestine, and the chair of the SAG-AFTRA National MENA Committee. My name is Riham Barghouti. I'm happy to be with you. I'm a panelist tonight and guest host at this point. Riham is I am an educator and an activist and a founding member of both the Palestinian Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel, PACB, and Adala New York, the New York Campaign for the Boycott of Israel. I lived for 10 years in Palestine working in education and advocacy, and I've been working on the global BDS movement since its founding in 2004, connecting cultural and academic work with struggles for justice. I'm happy to also have with me Melissa Nussbaum, Freeman, who is a theater maker, cultural worker, abolitionist, and activist based in Massachusetts. She is the founder of Red Sage Stories, playback theater, and art for social change, a BIPOC-centered theater company dedicated to healing and justice, and created and directed Jews for Palestine Playback Theater, specifically for the International Playback Theater Festival for Palestine. Someone who might be joining us at some point was the original moderator for the event, which is Hane, a psychoanalyst, playback theater practitioner, and human rights activist based in Belgium. He is the director of programs at the Resourcing Refugee Leadership Initiative and founder of Healing on the Move, which works to decolonize mental health through community care, artistic practice, and collective healing. Hani also founded SADA, a playback theater troupe in Lebanon, created safe spaces for displaced communities to share and transform their stories. So with that, we will begin. The main question that we will try to address is why art matters and what will artists do when silence equals complicity? The first question was originally for Amin, who kindly shared his comments and which Melissa will be sharing with us. The question was, across the cultural industries, from film to music to publishing, we see institutions using art to mask violence and normalize genocide. From your perspective as both an artist and an organizer, how does this system of cultural washing operate, and why is it so influential?
Thank you, Riham. And hello, friends. I'm honored to be sharing Amin's words, and I hope I do them justice. Culture undeniably has power, and artists shape that culture. When we think of the end of South African apartheid, we so often think of the artists who took a stand, right? When I was growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, I was ashamed to be Arab and Muslim. What the culture signaled to me through film, TV, news, media, and even literature was that we are irrational villains, corrupt buffoons, hypersexual deviants, or weird prudes. That we are essentially the opposite of normal or American. A defining moment for me in my understanding of this was when I was around 6 or 7 years old, and my mom was reading one of the Narnia books to me at bedtime. I remember there is a book in the series when all the villains are brown, wielding swords, and wearing turbans. She literally was like, "You don't need to hear this crap." And we never finished the book. My shame came from this and watching movies like Back to the Future or Naked Gun and having the movie theater cheer as the heroes shoot at random Arabs. A theater is a space where we're vulnerable and open as audience members, ready to receive. We can safely act out our fears, anxieties, fantasies in the darkness of the theater. That's one of the functions of the art. So we as artists have so much power in that way. We can make people feel emotions they didn't even realize they carry. So we have a responsibility. Every aspect of our art, of our storytelling, is a choice. We build little worlds, and one world that we've built, sadly, is one where Arabs and Palestinians are subhuman. So art absolutely plays a part in manufacturing the consent for something like the US killing millions of Arabs in Iraq or Israel's apartheid and genocide. In terms of normalization, Israel deliberately uses culture to whitewash and deny its crimes. Often, state arts funding includes clauses requiring artists to promote the policy interests of the State of Israel via culture and art, including contributing to creating a positive image for Israel. While Israel systematically destroys Palestinian cultural institutions and targets artists, they commission projects that aim to make the conflict appear normal and symmetric, as if the colonized have equal blame as the colonizer. The tides are changing. The recent Filmworkers Pledge, in which over 5,000 Hollywood and international stars and filmmakers like Emma Stone and Ava DuVernay have publicly refused to collaborate with Israeli film companies complicit in Israel's apartheid and genocide. Even Paramount's attempts to delegitimize the pledge have failed. No Music for Genocide followed closely after, and with over 400 musicians and record labels blocking their music from streaming in apartheid Israel, including Bajor and Massive Attack. Last year, over 7,000 writers and book workers joined the boycott of the complicit Israeli literary institutions. Norway's Actors Equity is recommending its members refuse work with complicit Israeli entities. And hundreds of cultural work organizations across the world have adopted PACBI's, that's the leadership of boycott, divestment, sanction guidelines in their programming and sponsorships, or are becoming apartheid-free zones. Major arts festivals around the world are dropping complicit corporate sponsors and or ended partnerships with Israel. Its lobby groups and complicit institutions. When our leaders fail, it is our profound ethical and legal duty to end complicity. Palestinians keep telling us true solidarity starts with ending complicity. And while some of this may feel like too little, as Israel escalates its genocide in Gaza and its settler colonial occupation in the West Bank, remember, BDS is ordered this way for a reason. The B and the D lead to the S. As artists, we must organize to refuse complicity and make BDS part of pop culture at large. That is our role.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Hello.
Hello, Hane.
Hi, Riham. I'm sorry I joined late because my laptop crashed and it got me some time to find a solution, but I'm here. Thank you for starting, and I welcome you again in this session. And maybe I can join you here by asking Riham a question about the cultural boycott and the attacks that usually come as limiting dialogue or shutting down art. But isn't it continuing business as usual with Israeli institutions, the real censorship, erasing Palestinian lives? Why do you think so many artists hesitate to take that moral stand?
Thanks, Hane. I'm so glad you were able to join us. And thank you also for helping to organize this panel. I think, first of all, it's important to note that when we say cultural boycott limits dialogue or shuts art down, we should ask ourselves which art and what dialogue are we privileging? So Palestinian cultural institutions have been totally destroyed by Israel. Palestinian cultural workers have been killed and injured. Their homes have been demolished, and their voices have long been silenced by Israel. Standing up in support of these cultural workers by refusing to be complicit in Israel's crimes against humanity is actually the least that artists can do in support of Palestinian cultural voices. And boycott in the United States is actually protected, or rather, we should say it should be protected under the First Amendment as a form of collective expression and petition. Saying that cultural boycott limits free speech is disingenuous, to say the least. But I want to put this into a larger context. Just days ago, the UN Commission of Inquiry has joined many Palestinian human rights organizations, international human rights organizations, and even Israeli human rights organizations. They issued a report detailing Israel's policies and practices that amount to genocidal intentions, including a specific attempt to destroy Palestinians in Gaza, as well as a clear intent to forcibly transfer Palestinians, expand Israeli Jewish civilian presence, and annex the entirety of the West Bank. Israel's mass starvation, killing, injuring, displacement of Palestinians, the destruction of the infrastructure, the targeting of the healthcare sector, the destruction of all academic institutions, including schools, colleges, universities, the targeting of journalists, has been widely documented by courageous and ingenious and steadfast Palestinians working on the ground. Within that reality, it's hard to understand how anyone in this time, at this point, can hesitate to, at the very least, do what they can to end their own complicity in the crimes against humanity that Israel is perpetrating. If we look at the international arena, even the staunchest allies of Israel, with the exception of the United States, are trying to somehow distance themselves from this complicity. Australia, Canada, France, the UK have joined over 150 countries so far that have recognized the state of Palestine. And though symbolic and perhaps even an attempt to silence dissent, this is nevertheless an important break from previous policies of these countries, and it was pushed by the amazing work that has been carried out in these countries in support of Palestine among cultural workers and others. The global South has risen in opposition to US and Western countries' hypocrisy in the application of international law, wielding these agencies to take action. So we have a situation where now the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant accusing Netanyahu of crimes against humanity. The International Court of Justice has ruled that Israel is plausibly carrying out a genocide and that the Israeli occupation and apartheid system is illegal. These, along the unprecedented action taken by people of conscience around the world, has moved nations to action for example, Spain and Italy sending their naval ships to protect the global Samud Gaza flotilla, and even the European Union now considering tariffs and sanctions on Israel. This explains what Amin meant in his comments when he said the boycott, the B and the D, the boycott and the divestment ultimately will lead to the S, the sanctions. So within this political climate and taking into consideration all of the cultural initiatives that Amin detailed in his remarks, it's difficult to understand how anyone, including artists, can continue to refuse to take a moral stand. However, many still do, and I think there are several reasons for this. One is that they are just ideologically committed to Zionism, which in effect makes them white supremacists who support Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people. They simply think it's right. Two, they may be profiting from their support of Israel, either financially or professionally. Three, they might fear retribution. So many artists and cultural workers continue to fear loss of jobs, the labeling of anti-Semitism, institutional censorship, if they do in fact speak out. But what we have to understand is these are targeted campaigns. So this backlash is often orchestrated by particular organizations such as Creative Community for Peace, which is a pro-Israel Hollywood lobby group that actively targets artists, performers, and journalists who speak out against Israel. And in a few recent campaigns, for example, they went against the British punk rap duo Pop Villain and the hip-hop Irish band Kneecap. But in the cultural world, as with almost every other sector, whether we're talking about unions, faith-based organizations, academic institutions, the egregiousness of the crimes that Israel is committing, alongside the strategic work of Palestinians and solidarity workers, and the steadfastness of our Palestinian brothers and sisters on the ground, has resulted in a shifting tide, with more and more artists and cultural workers taking a vocal stand against Israeli genocide through, among other initiatives, adopting the call for cultural boycott, signing on to the PACB pledge, refusing to engage with complicit Israeli cultural institutions, joining one of the many cultural groups that have emerged since the start of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. Ultimately, what every artist or cultural worker, indeed every human being, must understand in this moment is that silence itself is complicity. Legally, ethically, morally, it is incumbent to stand up in support of Palestine. As stated in the Film Workers' Pledge to End Complicity, signed by thousands of film workers just days ago, standing for equality, justice, and freedom for all people is a profound moral duty that none of us can ignore. So too, we must speak out now against the harm done to the Palestinian people.
Thank you so much, Riham. Melissa?
You posed a very special question
Yeah.
to me, and I'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, let me maybe say the question out loud.
Yeah.
I just wanted a second to breathe in after Riham's intervention, because what she said is really important to breathe it in and out. Having you here is very important personally for me, and for many reasons. First reason is because we together co-organized alongside other colleagues the Playback Theatre Festival for Palestine. Playback theatre, for those who does not know what it is a social theatre, a theatre for community building, and it's now around 70 countries around the world practiced. And the question of Zionism is a big question in the playback community nowadays. But back then in 2021, 2022, when we launched the Playback Theatre Festival, organized it, it was the first kind of it, such festival for like centering Palestinian topic in the playback world. My question is, the Playback Theatre Festival for Palestine made a bold choice to publicly state it would not accept Israelis or Zionist Palestinians, whatever is their stand against their government or not. It was not allowed for them to participate in any way. My question is, why was this clarity important, and what message did it send to the international cultural community?
Thank you for that question, Hani. And first, I want to thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel, and to the organizers of this event, because this is so important to have this out in the world, especially right now. We have to keep speaking, and as Riham said, silence is complicity, and so we have to make as much noise as possible. And thank you for also explaining a little bit about playback theater, but I want to add a little bit more about that, so there's some context for folks why did we take that stand, which was so important to us. Playback theater was created 50 years ago by a couple, Jonathan Fox and Joe Salas, and it is, as Hani mentioned, a social, it's community building. It's very much about relationships. It's improvisational theater, and specifically, we invite anybody in the audience to tell a true and personal story, which means anything can come up. And the actors on stage listen intently and then immediately perform through using metaphor via dance and words and music. They enact this story. What's particularly unique about playback theater is that the teller of the story, that person who offered that story in the first place, is the protagonist of the story and always has the last word. So that's very special about playback theater. It's not therapy, though it has therapeutic effects. It can be highly vulnerable, as you can imagine, telling a story, telling your personal story, and then having other people perform it. And it can be vulnerable not just for the teller, but for the audience and for the actors. And as Hani mentioned, there are like 70 companies. There's one on every continent, at least. And it is extremely popular in Israel. So there are many Israeli playbackers.
I think statistic says that there's in Israel 120 or 50 active playback company.
Incredible.
Which is the most in the world, actually.
Yeah. Which is quite a lot for a very small country. Palestinians and playbackers from the region have had extensive experience with Israeli playbackers. So we were listening to their experience. We were not making this decision in the air. It was based on the fact that Israeli playbackers basically used up all the oxygen in the room and did not give Palestinians the respect and dignity that was deserved. But that's just one part of the reason. The playbackers, Palestinian playbackers, shared with us that it was absolutely not acceptable to have Israeli or Zionists in the room. They would not feel safe, not safe emotionally or politically. And this to us was absolutely our priority. Our message to the world was that we were not turning our backs on Palestinians. We were not normalizing what others were trying to reduce to conflict, as we have heard before, that we did not see the Israelis and Palestinians as equal players in a room. We would not normalize this. There is no neutrality in the occupation. And we would not participate in normalizing oppression by inviting Israelis or Zionists. We would not engage either in debates about their definition of Zionism, just as we would not accept any degree of racism, we would not accept any degree of Zionism. And clearly for us, we understand Zionism as a very clear form of racism, as it is generally a white supremacist philosophy. We would also not be bullied by accusations of anti-Semitism, nor would we engage in conversations about whether Israel had the right to exist or not. We have all heard the brilliantly eloquent explanation by Francesca Albanese that countries don't have rights to exist. People have the right to exist. And in my specific role as a Jewish American playback theater artist, it was very important to me to bust the narrative that Judaism equaled Zionism. I think that's what I'd like to say about that experience, and how important that message was for us to deliver to the playback theater world.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I would like to add that festival inspired a lot of people around the world in the playback community. And till today, people are taking actions. And I want to acknowledge that it started with that specific stand. And this keeps telling me that if it could happen in the small playback theater community, it can happen everywhere. And we can always make a change, even with very, very small steps. Thank you so much, Melissa. I would like to maybe move to the second part of our conversation today. I wish so deep that Amin is with us today, but let's embody him in the room with us. I have prepared some questions for you, for Riham, for Amin, for me as well. And maybe we can chat about them. And I would like to invite you also to bring in any question you have in mind or any insight as well. And maybe I can start with a question about, like, simply what do you think is two concrete steps an artist, a cultural worker outside of Palestine can take this week to support the cultural boycott?
The thing that we have to appreciate about this current moment, as tragic as it is, as horrible as the current situation is, what it has done is mobilized hundreds of thousands of people to action. And it has spurred and created so many different groups within the cultural community, film workers for Palestine, dancers for Palestine, theater workers for ceasefire. So many groups have grown out of this that people in the cultural community can find support and can find organizations through which they can work, and can also find examples of really successful campaigns. So I think that people could look at the campaigns that have been developed and established and try to join perhaps, or at the very least become more informed. I would start with the BDS movement website and just try to understand what the cultural boycott is about, what the broader BDS movement is about, and these different actions that are taking place, and then look at their community and see where they might engage or intersect or be able to support in some way. So for some people, it might be signing a pledge. For other people, it might be looking at a local theater group, for example, and seeing if the organization would sign the pledge. For others, it might be looking at their institutions and seeing if they are invested in Israeli or complicit international companies and work on a divestment campaign. It depends. The beauty of BDS is it has a tried and tested operational principles of gradualness. So an incremental process of building power to affect policy change. Sustainability, looking at what previous achievements have had and building on them and widening them, and then context sensitivity. So being sensitive to the particularities of every context, what you're capable of doing, and what your objectives are. So with that, I would say the first thing is to be informed, and then the second would be to find where you're comfortable to start taking action.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Melissa, what do you think? Two things or more can be
Two
done?
things or more. Well, there's always lots to do. Thank you, Riham, for really situating BDS as a leader and a guide for us. Also, and getting informed is essential. I would say if you are an artist and you aren't connected to a local anti-Zionist group or organization, find them. Find what their strategic goals are, and then find out how you, through your art, can support those strategic goals. It might mean that you show up at their event and perform, or you create something that might be supportive. But find out what they're doing. Work with other people. Don't work alone. And do find the groups that are Palestinian-led by groups that have been established and are vetted, and you can rely on that leadership. I would say a group that you can join as an artist is Artists Against Apartheid. And I've asked that they put that link in the chat, our dear operators. And there is a statement that you can sign immediately against apartheid. So those are two things that you can do. Find your group, work with them, and then also sign the statement. I would say for anybody, as I'm in the United States, in the belly of the beast, I would say that you have many avenues to work through. One image I have of doing boycotts, taking one of the targets, the specific targets that BDS has set out for us, and performing as actors and seeing a procession of mothers in mourning and going and standing in front of a store or a place where that product is sold. Of course, you want to go with flyers that somebody who's not in your procession can be handing out so that people get informed and not just wondering, what are these crazy people doing? You want to impact with a very clear image, and you want to inform with a very clear statement. Leave you with that.
Thank you so much. I would like to take maybe a minute or a couple of minutes for people who are watching us now to think and maybe write down what is one action they might take based on what you said or based on what is accessible for them in this moment. I invite really everyone to get your phone note or a paper and a pen and just write a commitment. It's like a promise for yourself, one thing you would like to do. Thank you. One very simple thing, but also very powerful thing to do is to speak up, speaking out and raise your voice. And my question is about the risks of speaking up. It might come with experiences from many of us. It might come with loss of funding, blacklisting, and censorship. My question to you is, what risks should artists be willing to take right now, and how can communities support those who do take these stands?
I think that risks are always a very personal decision, and that you have to base them on your material conditions. Are you a person who will be deported? Are you a person who will be imprisoned? Are you, the risks right now in the United States are getting higher and higher. And I would say that the people who can take the risks, who can afford losing funding, who can afford being blacklisted, who can afford to be imprisoned because maybe they're white and they won't be terribly mistreated, or they have citizenship, so they won't be necessarily deported, although there's some threat now that even people with those with passports can be deported if they're not originally born in the United States. Also, people who are trans or gay people are under threat. So always in the United States, people of color, trans people, gay people, LGBTQ, marginalized people were always more at risk. So they should be protected more. And of course, Palestinians are the most vulnerable. And so we don't expect or ask them to take those risks. That's a very personal decision. Mahmoud Khalil is an incredible example of somebody who has taken so much risk and is so willing to stand there for his people. Not everybody can do that. And he also says that, is like acknowledging we have different situations. And I would say, if you're somebody who's willing to take a risk but can't lose funding, reach out to your community. This is why it's so important to work in organizations and be in community and not be someone taking a risk by yourself. Do it with full awareness of who will be your support. And also, let's thank the people who are taking risks. Let's be there and acknowledge what they're doing, and not everybody can do.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to say one more thing. Stop using Spotify. Go to Bandcamp, because Bandcamp supports their artists, doesn't censor them, and buy their music. Support them.
Can you write that maybe in the chat for us all? Thank you, Melissa. Riham?
Yeah, I agree with everything Melissa said, 100%. I think it is a very personal issue. People have to be aware that there will be backlash, and there might be repercussions for any action that they take, and now more than ever before. But what's equally true is that now more than ever before, there is support. The number of artists, and even very well-known artists, artists that are have millions of followers, okay, and have really the capacity to make change, are signing on to these calls for cultural boycott, not just calls for end of genocide, not just calls for the end of the war on Gaza, but really a call for cultural boycott. So there is a change. As repressive as the situation is, as inspiring as the people that are standing up are in terms of their numbers and in terms of how high profile they are. And I think that that's really important to understand. So when we started in 2005, really only artists that really were already operating outside of mainstream situations would be willing to visibly support the boycott call. Many did without stating that they were doing it. So they would cancel their performances in Israel, for example, or refuse to participate in Israeli-funded initiatives, but they would not be vocal, and they would not, state that that was the reason. And it's important to understand that there is this change, there is this shift. But taking into consideration everything that Melissa said, which is also true, there is a lot of counter actions being carried out. And like I said before, there are a number of organizations whose work it is to just target cultural figures that stand in solidarity with Palestine. The other thing to understand is that people are getting targeted for very little. So it's not just if you take a position in support of BDS, it's any time that you state anything in support of Palestine. So at some point, as a human being, as an artist, you want to ask yourself, can I handle to be silenced to that extent? I'm a teacher. I work in the Department of Education. I know every time I speak out about cultural boycott, I might be targeted. I might lose my job. I have taken that into account. Like Melissa said, I've taken my material situation into account, and I'm willing to sacrifice that because people are dying, right? Every single day, children are starving to death. It's gotten to a point where we can no longer just stand by and hope that somebody else will speak up. And I think that how dire the situation is has really motivated and mobilized people to work outside of their comfort areas, to kind of be willing to risk a little bit more, because in every age there is like a major moral question, right? A major moral thing that we have to come against, right? South Africa, apartheid South Africa, the Holocaust, the Rwanda genocide. There's these major things that we all become aware of, and we know we have to take a position one way or the other. The moral question of our time is Palestine. And so people have to take a position one way or the other.
Yeah, very true. I remember when we organized the Playback Festival for Palestine, people were telling me, you are not our friend anymore. And I was sad, but I was surprised how many new friends I made just from standing up for Palestine. Amazing friends. I don't regret losing those friends because I made more wonderful friends. And this is very like on a very shallow level of losses. So yeah, I also would say reach out. There are always people who will support you and be there for you. Maybe I go to my second question, which is about taking action, especially when we are in our online space. We have all seen people post slogans online on their different platforms. What does it look like to go beyond symbolic solidarity and actually disturb cultural washing in our own industries?
I think it's important for people to take positions and to make their positions vocal. I think it's an important first step. It's the beginning, right? Is to take that position, to make the pledge, to sign on to the cultural boycott call, to state that you will not perform in Israel or with complicit Israeli or cultural artistic institutions. And there are so many events that are happening now that enable people to take that first step. This whole event, the 24 hours for Palestine, very recently there was a Together for Palestine concert in London with hundreds of artists taking a position. But people, again, have to identify what's possible for them. I'm going to give a small example of the work that we do in the organization I work with, Amplify Palestine. So we have issued 3 volumes, the third of which came out on July 9th, on the 20th anniversary of the BDS movement call, with artists that are performing and singing and creating music in support of BDS. So not just kind of refusing to engage, but engaging artists. And by doing that, we're supporting the artists that are working with us, right? And creating, and it's distributed by Bandcamp. So I'm glad Melissa kind of did a shout out for them because that's our distributor. They are able to create music and create art in support of BDS. So that's kind of a different level of action that people can do. Another activity we're doing is we are hosting for the second year in a row a series of workshops by a Palestinian cultural dance troupe, members of El Funun, Palestinian dance troupe. So kind of bringing Palestinian debka and dance and art to the New York City community. They're also going to be performing in or carrying out workshops rather in Los Angeles and San Diego, in Minnesota and in New York. And that's going to happen in October. And you can check out the Amplify Palestine. That's amplifypalestine.org website for information about that cultural tour. So supporting Palestinian artists and kind of bringing Palestinian voices and raising those voices are two things, other ways that people can support and promote Palestinian culture.
I'll add to that recently I attended the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit, and there was an artist panel, and one of the Palestinian artists who is of the Debki dance troupe just asked for support, not for anything specific, but just support those artists. As we know, artists everywhere in the world need support, and just to be able to say, we support you as artists, that's one thing. And I wanted to give a couple of examples. Everything Riham mentioned is so important, and I'll try to add to that. There's a singer-songwriter, Leila Hegassi, who is a Italian Egyptian singer-songwriter who has been doing covers of songs in support of Palestine for the past 2 years or longer, actually. And she is now on the global Sumu flotilla. So that's one example of really putting your body, soul, everything you've got on the line. And I hope you can also go and support her on Bandcamp. She just recently came out with a new album. That's one example. Then there are artists, and I want to give a shout out to the Jewish American actress Hannah Einbinder, who on receiving her award, said, "Let Gaza live," and also said, "Fuck ICE." And so we have to see that those two, at least in the United States, in our context, are absolutely connected. And so when you're supporting people who have to defend themselves against deportation, you are also supporting the Palestinian movement, because the plan of the government is to unleash an army against our movement. And they're doing it from every angle. So not to see our mission as one single lane, but that we are connected. Intersectionality is really, really important. And as an artist, we know that we're connected. We know that we have to see if somebody is being oppressed on the Mexican-U.S. border. That's the same as them being oppressed and is at any checkpoint, or the Gazan border, or wherever. Those borders are absolutely connected, and to understand that.
Just to build on that, I mean, not only is it connected as ideological, racist, attempts to kind of continue to maintain colonization and settler violence and all of that, but actually Elbit systems, which created the apartheid wall in Israel, is the same Elbit systems that is creating the wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. So we can actually see how these components, intermix and continue to build from there. There are so many trainings for U.S. police by Israeli military, right? Training activities. There's so many real interconnected systems of oppression that only by making sure that our work and our activism is interconnected to respond to that will we be able to overcome them. Just in terms of final comments, I think people have to understand the cultural boycott of Israel is entering the mainstream. It's thanks to a lot of tireless work of so many progressive artists, BDS campaigners, and there is an important role for artists to play, right? And I hope that people just leave here kind of inspired to take action, willingness to be vocal and visible. The more voices that support an end to this genocide and this apartheid, the more we can support each other and withstand that backlash. The understanding that it has been 77 years of silence that has gotten us to this point. If people had begun to act after the first Nakba in 1948, after the 1967 occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, after the first Intifada, we would not have gotten to the point where we are seeing a genocide. So we can't wait any longer. And then just to find community, work with others. There's so many people out there that are doing amazing work, and I want to again thank the group that organized 24 Hours for Palestine and this panel as a part of that.
Thank you so much. Last words, Melissa.
I hate to have the last words because what Riham just shared was really, I just want to second it. I co-sign in every way. I think artists There's no society that we want without artists, and we want the future to be beautiful. And that's our job as artists, is to bring beauty into, as well as truth. And as Bertolt Brecht said, our work is a hammer. We're here to bust reality or what people think is truth so that we can have the world that we want and deserve.
Thank you so much. And let me end by saying that the stakes are very clear. In the end, culture is not a mirror in which we passively reflect the world. Culture is a weapon, either for oppressor or for liberation. And so that the choice before every artist, every cultural worker is brutally simple. Do you want to be soundtrack for genocide or a chorus for justice? Thank you so much, Riham. Thank you, Melissa.